Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webcast, Explore Power BI Dashboard in Just an Hour. This hands-on, high-level introduction to Power BI is an action-packed, hour-long workshop offering practical experience using Power BI, which includes building dashboards and visualizations. Whether your data is in an Excel spreadsheet or a complex collection of cloud-based and on-premises data sources, you can use Power BI to visualize data and turn it into actionable insight. During the workshop, you will learn about new features of Power BI, connecting to data sources, linking data from multiple sources, turning data into valuable and interactive insights, and sharing your visualizations with others. Next, I'd like to introduce today's presenter, Michael Hammonds, the Director of Business Intelligence at AKA. Before we get started, I ask that you please submit any questions you may have for today's presenter by typing them into the questions pane on the control panel. You may submit your questions at any time during the presentation, and we will address as many as possible during the Q&A session at the end of today's presentation. With that said, take it away, Mike.
Great. Thank you, Jessica, and thank you, everybody, for joining us today. I've got an action-packed, probably take us right at an hour to build our first dashboard here. So what we're going to do today is we're going to pretend that we're all from Van Arsdale, which is a company that makes really cool stuff that they sell to others, right? People, companies, organizations, doesn't really matter. But they also resell stuff from other manufacturers. So our goal here is to create a dashboard that shows data that's going to be related to sales, to products, and to geographies. Okay? So everyone should have gotten instructions on how to download the training files. And so I did make it easier here. If you haven't been able to do that, I suggest you do that rapidly right now because we'll have very little time for stopping. But in that case, you can go to http, I think it might be bit.ly/2DIAHV1. And that'll give you the zip file that you can then download. I recommend you put it in a folder called CDIH for Dashboard in an Hour to your local hard drive. Just makes it easy to find, but obviously you can put it anywhere you want on your My Documents folder, your desktop, whatever the case may be. But you do want to unzip or copy those files into the folder that you create. Okay. Hopefully everybody's got Power BI Desktop installed. And that's what we're going to focus on today is just Power BI Desktop. And then ideally, you've also already dialed in and signed into Power BI. So you can do that by going to app.powerbi.com. You do have to use your work credentials. Okay. Now, keep in mind that it's not critical that you that we publish or sign into the Power BI service. That'll be about the last 2 to 3 minutes where we'll publish our finished dashboard. Create a new dashboard and then share that with other team members. If you do have any problems, please post to the chat window and we'll address those in the order that they come, and somebody on our team will reach out to you and try to help you if we can. But keep in mind the session is going to be recorded for later viewing so that you will be able to go in and stop and start and go at a little bit more leisurely pace if you'd like to. Also, keep in mind that what I've created here are a set of folders with the training files. Okay, so we're going to use the text file that's called DAX formulas in your calcs folder, and that's just to make it easy to copy and paste. Okay, we're not going to dive deep into the nuances of the language that we're going to use to create some of our calculations, also known as measures. But just want to have those there so that it'll help speed this training session along. We're going to use one data source today, but it will have 4 tables in it. Okay, so assume that instead of this being a spreadsheet, this could just as easily be a SQL Server database. It could be an Oracle database. Could be multiple files sitting out on a network share somewhere. We've got an image file in there for our logo, just so you can see how you can spruce things up and add images and things like that. And then we've also got a finished report called vanarsdale.pbx in your report file. And if you'd like, you can actually go ahead and open that up, and that'll help you if you get stuck or you want to see how we actually build it it's a nice place to go and reference. So especially if you've got two screens, it's nice to have one of them opened on one screen, then you can do your work on another screen and kind of refer back to the finished product, so to speak. Okay, so what you'll see here, that's the spreadsheet. I'm not going to open it up now. We're going to open that up in Power BI, but you'll see that it's got a sales table, a product table, or worksheets in this case, a geo table, and a date table. Okay, so that's how we're going to build our data model today. So keep in mind, this is a relatively clean data source for us. We are going to go in and clean it up a little bit, and we're going to add some measures or calculations to this as well. But we're not going to dive deep into how you go in and clean up a much more messier file. That's something that we save for a full day training or for our 2-day training. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to build this right here. So it consists of 3 different tabs with a bunch of different visuals. So it should give you a good flavor for what the types of capabilities you can do very rapidly with Power BI and taking advantage of some of the different visuals. We're even going to use one of the custom visuals so you can see how you can pull in a custom visual and use that inside your dashboard as well. Okay, so with that, we're going to jump in and I'm going to show you just briefly the finished product. So we'll flip over to my dashboard here. And so this is the summary tab, okay? And so you can see here, we're gonna summarize some sales dollars and total units. We're gonna have some what in typically Microsoft Excel you would call a slicer. Here we just call them filters. Same thing, same concept. So you can see here, if I pick year 2015, notice that the data in my related charts will change. So in 2015, we had roughly 48,082,000 units. In 2016, we had 49 million, well, basically 50 million and 88,000. And so far, year to date in 2017, we're about 35 million and 55,000. So you can see, real nice, easy way to kind of manipulate the data. You can also pretty much click on any chart and you'll see that the related information will filter to the item that you selected. So that's really what makes this powerful, particularly for doing some additional data analysis off of just, a relatively simple looking dashboard. Okay. We're going to go in then and we're going to create a performance dashboard. And here's where we're going to get in some measures like year to date, last year, this year, those types of calculations so that you can see how those are done. Also do a little bit of comparison in a column chart here. We're also going to do a waterfall chart, and we're going to limit the data to just our current time period. So you see here, this one's going January to August. We're going to do a little gauge. I call these typically a KPI gauge, so that we can see how we're doing to date, what our goal is, and what we ultimately may be able to do if we pass our goal. Then we're going to go into details and just do a few little charts. Again, another kind of visual from a mapping geo perspective, and then give you some slice and dice on sales rep, segment, manufacturer, product, etc. Okay, so that's what we're going to be building today. So let's get started. Hopefully you've all already got open your Power BI desktop. And so this is the first screen that you're presented with. So you can see here, I'll have my recently used list, but I can click the get data from here, but I'm just going to close this for now. And we're going to go out and we're going to go and connect to our data source, okay? And the way that we do that is we select this get data button. And in this case, we already know that it's Excel. If I wanted to see additional items or data sources that we can connect to, I can go to more. And this is a list of all the different types of data sources that have pre-built connectors. I think there's 70 plus now. Microsoft releases several per month. So if you don't see an application or a subscription-based system that you are using today, chances are, if it's popular, it's going to be added. If not, there's other ways to get around that, like, for example, through, if it's an old system, ODBC, if it's newer, or they can export data into Excel or text files, or can do that. But first, let's grab Excel. I want to click our Connect button. And what we want to do is we want to navigate to that folder that we created, and we want to go to the data folder in this case. Okay, so we go to our data folder, and then select the data.xlsx spreadsheet. Okay? And we're gonna hit open here. And throughout the session, I'm gonna pepper in some like recommended best practices, also some little tips and tricks. So again, this is gonna be recorded, so you'll have this to be able to go back and refer to. We'll also post the PowerPoint presentation. So what you're gonna see is we've got a number of tables, and if I just kind of click on one, it'll show you the data in the table. So those are the actual tables that are in those spreadsheets. And you can see that looks like a little table, but what we're gonna do is we're gonna grab the worksheets in this case. So we wanna check these last 4 worksheets and pull those into our data. Okay, that's what we're gonna be reporting off of. So each of those is in a different worksheet in my spreadsheet, like we showed earlier, but we're gonna pull all 4 of those in at the same time. Okay. Now here's tip number 1, and probably 90+% of the time when you connect to data, you wanna click this edit button. It's gonna be rare, unless you have really clean data sources, that you're just gonna go ahead and hit the load button. Or if you're just doing a simple dashboard with a spreadsheet or a text file, and it doesn't really need a lot of cleaning up, then you can hit load. But 9 times out of 10, you're really gonna hit the edit button. Okay? And what the edit button does, that will, first of all, start to pull in additional data from that data source and start to process what it calls queries. And then it's gonna take us to an edit window. Now, notice there every now and then that you'll see that it didn't pop up a window. I don't know if it's a bug, maybe it isn't, but if you Alt-Tab, you should be able to flip over to what's called the Query Editor button. Okay, so I'm gonna zoom in on this, and you'll see here at the top is this Query Editor. What we're now looking at is actually a tool, a component, an add-in with Excel that was called Power Query. It still is in older versions of Excel. Today it's just called Get Data. But for your information, what we're actually using here is Power Query to load this data. And we're gonna do a little bit of cleanup here as well. Okay. So the first thing that we wanna do is, let's start with our date table. And now notice on the left-hand side, this is where our tables are. Okay, so those are the 4 tables we brought in, but when I click on one, you'll notice that there's some steps over here on the right-hand side. If I click on Geo, it'll be the same steps and product. But what this is essentially a recorder that is tracking the individual steps that you do, so that, number 1, you know what you've done to create your dashboard and to clean up your data sets, but you can also go back in time and fix things if they happen to be broken. Okay? So let's first start with cleaning up our date table. Okay. And we always recommend a date table, and we'll get into some of the reasons why in a deeper training class, but just kind of, be aware that a date table is really always highly recommended. For our purposes, we don't need this month column. So what we wanna do is highlight that column, and in this button above, select Remove Columns. Okay. Now notice that it removed the column, and over here on the right-hand side, it shows me that that's what I did. Okay, so if I wanted to go back in time, I could start there. I could remove that where I removed the column and start over again if I needed to. Okay. Another thing that we want to clean up here is the year column. Now, even though 2015 is a number, technically years aren't numbers when it comes to filtering data. Okay, what happens in Excel and happens in Power BI is if it thinks it will try to summarize that. So to make sure that it doesn't do that, we're gonna change that to just being a text file. And so we can go over to our transform, and in here we can change it from whole number to text, right? And I'll show you another place that we can do that as well. So let's go ahead and do that. So let's assume that this data looks close enough and that we now want to go ahead and load that data into our data model and start to do a little bit more cleanup. So we're going to go to the Home tab. So go to our Home tab here, and then select Close and Apply. And then once we hit the Close and Apply, you want to select the first one, Close and Apply button. Okay. Now what you'll see is that's going to actually go out to that data source, and it's going to pull that data in, and it's also going to remove that one column that we said we don't need. Okay. So that'll take probably, depending on your machine, anywhere from about 15, 20 seconds to maybe 30 to 45 seconds. Okay. There's a fair amount of data in this spreadsheet. I think the sales column is somewhere approaching 200,000 rows of data. So, you know, it's not small. So you can see that once we pull this in, you know, there's going to be some really good performance here. Okay. So notice that the query has stopped loading, but what it did is we see now our tables over here, and if we expand any of these, we'll see the individual columns that were in the spreadsheet that it loaded. Now, before we start building anything, we're going to go in and do a little bit of additional cleanup. Okay. So I'm going to go now to my product table. Okay. And this is where you want to open up your calculation file. Okay. So if we go over to, go over to our folder here, go into the calcs folder, and then open up our DAX formulas.txt. Okay. So what this will see several different formulas in here that we're going to use today. Okay. So first one is at the bottom, and we're going to create what's called a calculated column. Now, generally, you don't do calculated columns, or we don't recommend that you do calculated columns in your data tables. You want to try to get those in your source data if possible, but sometimes it's not possible, and there's sometimes where it's perfectly fine, especially in this case where it's a small table and it's really just a lookup table. But what we're wanting to do is create a new column, and in that new column, we want to say, is this column, does it have Van Arsdale in it, or does it have something else in it? So go to our modeling tab, and then we want to select new column. Make sure that your product table is highlighted, because that's where we want that to go. So we go new column, and now you'll see that it's got a formula bar that, if you are an Excel user, looks very similar to Excel, right? It's got the little X box, the little X mark, the little check box. And now if I paste in that formula, you'll see what it's doing here. So we're creating a column, and that's the name, is Van Arsdale. And it's just a simple if statement. If the manufacturing column, that's this column, oops, and now we'll go back and re-edit that. If the manufacturing column equals Van Arsdale, then select, put a yes in that column. If it has anything else, then put a no in that column. And if we scroll down, and we'll kind of see that there's some no's. See, so those are some, that's data from another manufacturer that we sell. Okay, so that's all that's doing, very simple if statement. Okay. Now we're going to create a few more, but this time we're going to go to the sales table. Okay, and in this case, we're going to start at the top, and we should be pretty much go from the top down. So copy and paste your sales equals sum revenue. Okay, so over on my right-hand side, first go to sales table, because that's where we want it to show up. And now in this case, what we're going to do is we're going to create a measure. Okay. And think of measures, those measures are your calculations. And anytime you want to display something that calculates, you really should be creating a measure. Okay? And that's one mistake that we see in people that are just starting off, is that they'll typically do calculated columns and then do a sum on a column. What you really want to do is a measure, because the measure tells the Power BI engine this is a calculation, and this engine loves calculations. That's what it's designed for, is calculations. Okay, so we hit new measure, and it actually functions very similar to the calculated column. You'll see the same field is in here. You know, I can even expand this a little bit if I want to get a little bit fancy, but I paste that in. And all we're doing here, this is a simple sum. So a lot of people have probably done this in Excel. So I want a measure that says sales, and I just want to sum the sales table, right? Here's our sales table. Let me zoom in on that. We want to sum our sales table. There's our sales table. And we're going to sum up the revenue column in that table. Okay? That's what we're doing here. Very simple. Boom, hit the check mark. And you'll see that instead of adding a column here, it's just going to add a new field over here on the right-hand side, and you'll see there's a little calculator there to tell you that that's a measure or a calculation. Okay, so we're going to go in, and now we're going to speed up just a little bit, and what we want to do is copy in these additional formulas, and I'll explain a couple of them just so you know what we're doing. So we copy the second one. Now we're going to again go new measure, and now let's paste this one in. And in this case, you'll see that we're doing a total year-to-date function, okay? And this is a built-in function, so we're just saying for the year-to-date, I want to sum up the sales revenue, and then I want to basically calculate that against the date table. It has to know where the date is that you want to use, okay? So we're going to do that. Now let's go and grab our third, or technically our fourth calculation, and we're going to go sales last year. So I'm going to go new measure here. And then again, paste. And here, I'll zoom in so you see what this one's doing. So sales last year, this is where we're going to use a new function called calculate. And since we're telling it we want to go backwards a year from wherever we're at today, that's what this function here is doing. So it's basically saying, you know, take my date table and subtract 1 year. You know, we could also do date add, that could be month in there, that could be week, that could be quarter, I think quarter, it could be day. So you kind of get the idea of, you know, that's what it's doing to kind of get a period prior to where we're at currently. Okay, so check mark there. And let's go grab the next one, and we're going to do sales last year to date. And copy that. And now create a new measure. And again, you should see that they're filling in over here on the right-hand side under my sales table. Let's paste that in. So this is sales last year to date. And so here's another function that we're using called same period last year. Right, so same period last year. So we're in August, right? And this calculation is going to take me from January to August of last year. Right? So we're going to do that. And now we're going to grab our next formula. And this is just going to be a sales variance. Okay, we basically want to know, how do we compare last year to this year, right? What's the difference in those numbers? So again, new measure. And we're going to paste. And so this time you'll see what we were noticing, a little bit different thing here. This case, we're actually taking 2 different measures that we created previously and subtracting those. Now, technically, you could sum each of those fields and then do the sum last year to date and the sum same year to date period. It's the same.
And if we can change it once, and it will change throughout where we've used that. Versus Excel, if I've done a bunch of calculations and maybe I've done them in different worksheets, I have to go back to each individual worksheet, find that calculation, and change it there. So it's the concept of use once and deploy many, and it makes your life so much easier by doing this. Okay, so we got, I think, just 1 or 2 more. Yeah, 2 more. So now we're going to get a percent change. And here's where we're going to use a divide measure. So this is a new measure. And then we're going to paste this in. And now you'll see there's my divide function. And again, I'm using my previous dimensions, my previous measures that we created. So the sales one minus sales last year over sales. Very simple percent change calculation. And then finally, we're going to do another simple one. We just want to get total units. And so new measure. And then we're going to paste that in and hit the check marks. Now, we're going to clean this up a little bit more because we want to be as friendly as we can to our end users who are going to consume our dashboards and our reports. Okay, so some of these fields we're not going to report on. So let's just hide them from view. Okay, and the way you do that is you just right-click on any of the fields, and then you say hide in report view. So we don't need to see the product ID because we're not going to report on that. We don't need to see it in this table either, so we're going to hide that. We don't need the manufacturer ID. We're going to hide that. So we're basically kind of hiding the different, primary keys if you're have a database background. And I'm actually even going to hide this revenue one because I don't want people using that one. I want them using the measure that I created where it's referencing that. Okay, and we don't need the date table here either. So let's go ahead and hide that. Okay, so now let's go and start to create some of our visuals. So go to our little visual tab. Okay, so again, upper right-hand corner, go to our visual tab, and that's where we're going to start. Okay, so first thing we wanted to do is we want to have, and I'll just pull over my previous model here, right? We want to do sales, revenue, and we want to do units. Okay, so we're going to do a little quick tip here. And so the first thing we're going to do is just drag sales, and this is going to be total sales. So we want to drag sales and just drop it on the canvas.
Pause 1 second. If very first formula that you dropped in actually isn't in the text file. Isam, thank you so much for pointing that out. I really appreciate it. If you could drop, so just hold there for a second while everybody gets that formula. So that's sales equals sum, in parentheses, sales and revenue, guys, if you see that on the screen. I will also drop that into chat for everyone as well.
There we go. Thank you. All right. So let's now go back to and start to create our visuals here. Okay. So notice it typically defaults to like a column or bar chart, but we don't want that. Okay. In this case, we just want to select this card one. So it's the one that's got little 1, 2, 3 on it. Now we're going to clean it up, make it a little bit prettier. And so we go to our format tab. Okay. So our little format tab, it's actually a tab or button, whatever you prefer. In this case, I don't want the category. So that you'll see the sales will disappear over here. Notice that. But I do want to add a title. Okay, so we're going to turn on our title. In this case, I'm just going to call this sales and give it a little revenue number, little $sign. And I want to make the text white and the background this lovely green. Okay, and it looks a little small, right? So let's bump that up to maybe, I don't know, you can go 12 or 14 so people can actually read it. And yes, that is a slight annoyance. For whatever reason, almost all the text in the visuals defaults to 8 points. That should be fixed at some point in the future where you can set what you want that default size to be, but you know, you're going to do a fair amount of resizing when you do that. Okay? But anyway, now we want to go ahead and just kind of scrunch that up and then put it kind of in our top left corner. Now here's where the tip comes in. To make it easy, I'm going to just go ahead, I'm going to copy and paste. So I make sure that that's highlighted. And you do have to use your control keys or your keys on your keyboard. So control C, and if I hit control V, you'll see that it's going to paste another copy of that. And we can just kind of put that right beside there. Right? And now what we're going to do is we want, in this case, to change that to units. Okay? So go back to our fields tab here, and we're going to replace sales with total units. So now notice we've sold 226 units in the data that we have, but we now also need to change that title there. So go back to the format tab, go back to title, and just change that to units. Simple, all right? Now, let's do this little copy and paste thing again, pretty easy, so that we can have, well, actually, I'll tell you what, here's what we're going to do next. So we can change that to something like this. And we could then drag and drop, go to our date field, and then we could drag and drop that onto our visual there, okay? And there's nothing wrong with that. Oops, wrong date. And we would not want to summarize that. So that's one reason we don't want to do that, okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to add a new visual here. And this is a visual I like to use for slicers or for selecting. And this one's called a chiclet slicer, okay? So we're gonna go in and you're gonna hit this little 3 little ellipses there. And that's gonna allow us to go to the store. In this case, we wanna import from store, and we're gonna import a custom visual, okay? So notice that you could also import from file. So if you you can create your own custom visuals. In that case, if it's not in the store, you can import it from a file. But let's go in and we're going to start and do a search for, just do C-H-I-C-K. Oh, not a very good search engine there. Spell out chiclet, C-H-I-C-L-E-T. And you want to see chiclet slicer. Okay? And then you'll want to select the add button. Okay? And now, it takes a few seconds. It'll tell you, oh, I've imported, and then you should see your new visual show up here. And now let's go in and I'll show you why I like this little chiclet slicer. So you can actually just click that and notice that it'll give you an empty one on the table, on the canvas. So now here's where we want to grab our year. Okay, so let's grab, and we can just drag and drop the year on there. And now we want to format that. Okay, so let's go in and now notice here that, see, it's a better button than a little checkbox. I find it's easier for end users to use these little chiclets when they want to select something on the screen than when they want to use like a little filter button that's got little check boxes beside the value. Okay, so we're going to go in and we're going to quickly change this, and we're going to do something similar. We're going to make it somewhat look like that. So we go to our format button here, and we're going to turn the title on, and we're going to expand that again, and we're just going to call this year, and I'm going to have this in white, and then we're going to select, in this case, let's pick this little dark gray color, so just to the right of my green color. And again, let's make that size a little bit bigger so that people can actually read it. And then we want to get rid of that header there. Okay, so now we've cleaned that up a bit. So now let's do the same thing here. We're going to copy and paste. So I'm going to Control-C and Control-V. And I'm going to do it one more time because we're going to have quarter and then we're going to have month. Okay? And now I can kind of move these around a little bit, and now we want quarter to be here. So we're just going to go to here. We can remove that. Oops. Typically, you want to drag and drop the value first. So we're going to grab that and put our quarter on there. And we can modify this a little bit more. Okay, so we want to get that from year. We want to change that to quarter. I'm just going to go QTR. And I also want to change this, instead of 3 columns, I want it to do 2 columns. So notice how it changed from 3 to 2 columns. Okay, I can make those a tiny bit smaller. And boom. Okay, so there's our quarter. And now we want to create our month slicer here. Okay, so we do the same thing. That's selected. Go back to our Fields tab, and now we want to pull quarter. Oops, pull month. Name, and make sure you pick month name on here. Right now, notice in month name there's something a little unusual going on here. April, January, May. Okay, those aren't sorted. So let's clean that up a little bit more, and we want to change this to, I want 6 columns. Okay, so there. Now I've got my year, my quarter, and now let's change that to month. Okay. So go to our header.
Mike, sorry, quick thing. Could you just run through the year slicer one more time? Mario, thanks for chiming in there. He just needed just a quick refresher there.
So we want to pick our chiclet slicer. Okay, so make sure you've got your chiclet slicer. And then over on the right-hand side, you just want to pick year. And you can drag that onto the category, or you could drag and drop it right onto the visual. Okay, so there's our year slicer. And then go over to your Format tab. You want to turn off the header, turn on the title, call that year, change your font color to white, and your background to this dark gray. Oh. Okay. So there's your year chiclet slicer. And then remember, you want to copy and paste to then do the same thing with quarter and do the same thing with month. Okay. We're going to get rid of those. Now let's do our little combo chart that's got a line and a column chart in. Okay. So that's you're gonna find that right here, and that's a line and clustered column chart. We can expand this a little bit here, and so we want this to be sales. Okay, so that's going to be what we're measuring. So I can drag my sales, and I want to put those to my column values here. Right. And now we want to see this by month. Okay, now we're going to go over and we want this to be month. Right? So there we've got our, now notice again, just like up here, those aren't sorted correctly. So let's go in and we're going to make sure that our months are sorted correctly. Okay, so we do that by going to our data table and then go expand that. And now pick the month name. Okay, so what we want to do here, you'll see that when I've selected month name, up here in the top of my toolbar, I've got sort by column. And so in this case, you know, it's just sorting alphabetically, but what we want is to sort by the actual month name, so the month number. So you select sort by month number. And so it's just going to evenly match. So where 7 is, it's July, where 1 is January, and that's how it's going to sort. So if we go back to our table here, we should see that we've got now January, February, March, April, May, and that has now all very nicely resorted. Okay. Now, what we want to go ahead and add, and for some reason our sales from revenue. It's a little odd there for some reason, but let's go ahead now. And the other thing that we want to do is we want to grab our units. Okay, and so we can drag our units and put that as our line value. So let's go in and see why our sales. And our sales is not looking properly here. We did our month name, we did our quarter. Let's try. That should be sum of sales revenue. Okay. For some reason, that's decided to not work correctly. So one thing we can do is unhide that. And then I'm going to try something real quick here. We're going to put revenue on there instead of sales. We can get rid of sales. All right. Well, I'll have to troubleshoot that at some other time, but we should be basically seeing something like this. Something in my data table showing all the revenues the same, but we should see different slices like that. So we'll come back to that, and we're going to go ahead and create another visual here. And in this case, what we're going to do is we're going to pick our tree map. Okay, so this is a tree map. So over on our right-hand side, click on the canvas first, and then we want to pick this one that's kind of third from the map called tree map. We can expand that out a bit. And now this time we want to see our manufacturers here. So we go to our manufacturer table, and that's where we want to get our groups. And then we want to see sales on our values. There. See, now that one's working correctly. So we must have an odd filter or something here. Maybe. Yeah. Well, don't have time to filter that right now. Okay, maybe. All right. We'll try and figure that out later. But next we want to do a map table. Okay. So in this case, what we're going to do is we're going to select the globe. Okay. So click on my canvas, click the globe, and I don't want to punch that down here. And we're going to put sales by state and by segment. Okay. So here's where we're going to do another little bit of a cleanup. Okay. So notice here that my state is telling me that this is a text field, but that's fine. But what you actually want to do is tell the system so that it can more properly use maps that this is actually, a state or province. And we can do the same thing with city. So we can pick city and then go to data category and pick city. And so when you have it and telling it, see that there's a little globe now, I can do the same thing here and I want to tell it that's the zip code. It just helps Power BI understand that that's geographic related data. Okay. So now what we want to do is we want to grab our state field, and that's going to be where our location is. And we want to grab sales, and that's what we want as our size of our bubble. So you notice the size, the bigger the bubble, the more the revenue. And we wanted to select segment, and so that's going to be our legend. And now you see it gives you a little pie chart. Okay, so I could scrunch these up a little bit and make that a little bit bigger. And now we see, and we're going to do the same here, make that a little bit bigger. If I expand this, I can actually expand this, and now you'll see, if I hover over the little pie chart, it's actually showing me the different numbers here. Okay, pretty sweet, right? Now notice also that this is in basically decimal format, so we can actually fix that too. So let's go in and for our sales, pick the sales table, and now you can go hit this little dollar sign. Okay, so hit the dollar sign and then hit English. So I'm going to zoom in on that. So pick your dollar sign first and then pick English. Okay. And so what that's going to do is you'll see that it will change our numbers to dollars. And then if I hover over it, now you'll see that that visual is now picking up dollars. instead of decimal numbers. Right? Simple.
Hey, my quick question from the folks, are there grid lines or points that can be turned on here?
Yep. Oh, I'm sorry. Now, what was the question?
Are there grid lines or points that can be turned on in that map functionality?
You can use a different map, and we're going to use that. So yes, absolutely. You can go all the way down to street level, and awesome. You can even use something called S3 maps or ArcGIS maps and get even more granular. So yeah, absolutely. Okay. Now we're going to finish out this tab, and we're going to use our donut chart. So we're just going to click the little donut or the little circle gauge there. And then this time we want to see revenue by segment or sales by segment. So we want to drag sales to our values. And then we want to grab our product segment, and that will be our legend. And now you can see that those will actually match the colors on our map. Now let's change this tab to call that summary. Oops, not summary, summary. And boom, there's our first tab. Okay. Now, the last thing we want to add here is a quick little logo. So go to your home tab, and then you'll see here you've actually can now add an image. And so I just click that little new image, new image button, not the page button. And now you want to drag or navigate to your DIH folder, and then go to your data folder, and you'll see the little logo there. And then you can resize it, and I'm just going to put mine down on the lower right corner. There's kind of another tip. We typically want to reserve the upper left quadrant for valuable data. So I generally don't put logos in upper left-hand corners. You don't want to put them in the upper right or lower right. That way you're not taking up valuable real estate with just an image. Okay? Oftentimes, if it's all internal, then I won't even use an image at all. Okay, now we're going to step it up a little bit faster. So we're going to go ahead and click this little new page button. I'm going to go ahead and rename this one to performance. And now let's go ahead and add a little title to the top. And the way we do that is we hit our little text box. Okay? So at the very top, our home tab. Okay, there's our home tab. And we want to go over and select text box. There we go. And then it will give you a little box here, and I can just click inside of it, type performance, and you can highlight it and make the text bigger. So I'm going to go like 40 and maybe bold, just so you can see that, yeah, you can add text and you can put it pretty much anywhere. I'm just going to put mine in the center. Okay, and so now what we want to do is we want to create our line chart. Okay, so click on the canvas, and we want to go with our line chart here. And now our line chart is going to be now we're going to use one of those measures, sales year to date compared to sales last year to date. Okay, so make sure that's highlighted, and we're going to grab sales last year, so sales year to date rather. So go sales year to date and sales last year to date. So the LYTD. And there, we kind of put it right underneath there. And there, again, something's not calculating correctly here. Let's try and just tell it that, yep, that's a date. So that's fine.
Hey, Mike, sorry. Esam actually just chimed in here. Thank you, Esam. He said that the relationship between date table and sales table is broken, and that's why revenue table
thank you. Yes, we did skip a step. So now you can see how things will start to act weird when your data model's not correct. So that was a test. Great pickup. Somebody gets a star for that. All right. So let's go fix our relationships in our tables. Okay. So we click on our little, what looks like a little, I don't know, what do you call that? But basically that's the relationship button. And now notice here, you can, down here in the lower right corner, you can click this little button here that will then resize this. So that's what the problem was. Our date table's not connected to our sales table. Okay, so really easy way to do that, grab and drag and drop and just drop it right on date. Even though it's hidden from report view, doesn't matter, the data model still sees that. Okay. Now, I want to zoom in a little bit here, point out a couple things. So notice that when we pulled it in, Power BI does a pretty good job of figuring out relationships if it can. So in this case, it connected the zip code table to the zip code field in our sales. And it also, well, we just dragged our date table and relayed that to our date table, but it also picked our product ID, right, and saw product ID in that table. So it's generally pretty good at figuring those things out, okay? Now that we've got our tables all connected correctly, I bet if we go back to our summary table, that should hopefully fix that visual that was giving us problems, and there we go. So there, that's what we want to see, right? And then if we go to our performance table, we should hopefully also see the same thing. We should see a line chart, but that's sales year to date, so last year. All right, well, we'll try and fix that one again later as well. So we're going to now add 2 filters to this table. And instead of the chiclet, I'll show you the difference here. So remember we created our Van Arsdale calculated column. Drag and drop this anywhere on a blank canvas, okay? Notice again, it's small, so go to your Format tab. And in this case, we want to go to the grids and scroll down, make that like 14 points so that we can see it. And this time it's going to be a filter. So you want to change this to this little filter or slicer icon. And now notice that you get a little yes and no on there. Then you can also increase the size of those in there as well, okay? And now we're going to do the same thing here. You know, what I like to do is if I've already got a year selector, I go back to my previous area. I'm going to grab year here, Control C, go back to my performance tab, paste, and then put it where I want. Okay? So now I've got 2 additional slicers or filters here on this table. So now the next thing we want to create is a clustered column. Okay, so by state. So in this case, we're going to pick our clustered columns here. All right, pick that. I'm going to expand this a little bit. And now we want to go by state. So we're going to grab state, and that's going to be our axes. And then in this case, we can just do, let's just say same thing. Let's try sales last year and sales, let's go sales year to date.
Hey, Mike, Don just suggested adding month name on the A-axis.
On this one here, there we go, yeah. Let's do that. Month name.
Thanks, Don.
There we go. That's right. Now notice that you kind of flatline here. So because in our date table, we've got all the way out to the end of the year. If I want to fix that, I can click this and highlight that. And then I want to go to my filters here, expand those, and just pick the current months, right? So we're now January through August. And then next month, I would go and flip it to the next month. There's a way you can do that in your calculations. That's a little bit more advanced, but I just want to kind of point that out. So somebody else got a gold star. Now, notice here, it's not really formatted all that well. I want to sort those. So we go in and I can just sort those by, pick either one, sales last year. So now we got a nice little column there. Now we're going to do our variance. Okay, we remember sales last year minus sales this year. So in that case, we're going to do a waterfall chart. Okay, and our waterfall chart here is kind of usually right here on the right-hand side, waterfall chart. And now what we want to do, expand that out a little bit. In this case, we're going to have month name. So we're going to drag our month name, grab our filter here, get rid of that. See, our visual wasn't selected, so that's going to be our category. And then we want to have sales variance. So scroll down and pick your sales variance and put that on your y-axis. Okay. So there we are, that's through the end of the year. So now again, we can do the same thing and we can create a filter here. Now, if I wanted, instead of doing them individually, I could actually also drag month name to my page level. So let's assume that for this page, I always wanted to see, the most current month. Okay? So we can come into here, or I could select all, turn off my blank, and then turn off December, November, and October, and September. So see how that cleans that up a little bit more. And so now we see just how we're doing period to date. So now last thing we're going to add here on this page is our little KPI chart, also known as a gauge chart. And in this case, what we want to see is sales year to date. So we're going to grab sales year to date and add that to, up here, to our value. And now we could have in our data set, we could have put our target, our annual targets, and our minimum and maximums. But let's just say that, you know, in this case, we didn't get it in there. But we can still go in and manually put that information in. So make sure you've got your gauge selected, go to the Format tab. And now this time we're going to say, give it a minimum of 0, a maximum of 50 million. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And our target, let's just say, is 40 million. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Boom. So now we see that we're very nearly close to our target. So that's a simple, easy way without having to add data, create a new table, anything like that. Create a target for our sales this year, sales year to date. Okay. Now we're going to very quickly. We've got 5 minutes, so let's see if we can create our last chart in 5 minutes. So I'm going to call this details. All right, and this one is going to add a new feature called with our data bars. Okay, so we're going to grab and use our matrix, or this is kind of a pivot table, if you will. So select this matrix, and now in this we're just going to select year. I'm going to drag that down there, and so we want to see year on our columns. Okay, and then we want to see category from our product table on the rows, and we want to see, let's just do sales because we want to see all of sales. Boom. Okay, and now of course go to our Format tab and let's make those bigger so that we can actually see those. So I'm going to go 14. That's better. Now I'm going to go into our sales values here, and we're going to select conditional formatting. So this is just like you do it in Excel. You go to conditional formatting, select data bars. I usually just leave it at the default values. So, you know, higher is going to be green, lower is going to be red. So boom, we pick OK. And there's our, so it looks like urban category for all 3 years has been our highest. Now let's make this a little bit snappier. I'm going to come over to here and I'm going to create 4 more tables. And let's just select. So copy, Control C, Control V, and we're going to just clean those up. And now what we're going to do is change this one first. So I want to see this now, sales rep. Okay, and I want to change this to a matrix table. So I'm going to use a different table here. And in this case, we want to see sales, but we also want to see sales rep. I'm going to drag that up to the top here, and now I want to get rid of category and I want to get rid of year, and boom, and now we can filter or sort that by sales, so it's highest to lowest. Boom, there we go. Now let's go in and get our segment. So we want to see segment on here, and Control V, and we want to see manufacturer, and we want to see product. Okay. So here I can just rapidly go in, grab product, get rid of sales rep. Okay, and here we want manufacturer. So I'm going to grab manufacturer, get rid of sales rep. And on this one, we want segment and get rid of sales rep. And now we're going to do one more chart, and we're going to do a different mapping chart. In this case, we're going to do a shape map. Okay. And then I want to see this by state. So we're going to grab state. Oops, wrong one. Undo. Select my chart there, and you can Control Z to undo and or hit your little undo button up there. So we want location as state and our value as, or color saturation as sales, and boom, there we go. And then if I wanted again, if let's say I want to go back and grab one of my other filters here, grab my year, Control C, go back to details, Control V, and I can put that anywhere, obviously, and now we see, boom, all of my charts are still linked. I see the year for 2015, And my sales for 2016, there's my sales for 2017. So there we did in 1 hour with 2 minutes to spare, a dashboard that I think would be very helpful to many individuals. And so you too can really take advantage of these. So let's see now, within that last 2 minutes, I'll show you what we can do. We hit our publish button. If you haven't signed in already to, and you haven't saved it first, you want to make sure that you save it. Okay, and let's just call this DIH, and it'll save that. But it'll then prompt you to log in to your Power BI site if you haven't already done that. And then it will tell you, okay, where do you want to publish this? So I'm just going to scroll down. I've got different workspaces. I'm going to go webinar, select that. And now it's going to tell me here, it's pushing now the file from my local area or my local desktop, and it's now pushing that up to the PowerBI.com service. Let's click on that, and you're going to see it's going to take me to my Power BI. This is where that login and being able to have this connected to your work email. And so I'll show you very quickly now how to create a dashboard and then share that information, and we can then open it up to questions. Okay. So here we go. It's opening up to the dashboard that we created. Ta-da. And so let's say, you know what, I like this tab there. So I want to pin this, and it's going to ask you, do you want to pin it to an existing dashboard or a new dashboard? Let's call this DIH. I want to pin that. Maybe I like to see that visual on there as well. So I'm going to pin that one to DIH. I'm going to go over to my summary tab, and let's pick maybe a couple of more. So we're going to pin that one to my visual, to my dashboard, and pick DIH here. And maybe I want one of these other ones. I want one of these little KPI indicators on there. Notice that if I had other dashboards, I could actually go in and then also pin those to my same or existing dashboard. But let's see what that did. If I go to my workspace, I expand that. There's my dashboard. So there's the visuals that we pinned, right? And now, if I want to share that, and I can drag and drop, I can drag these around. If I want to see those, you know, on one page, we can do that. But now, to share that with other individuals, I hit my share button, and I simply type in. So let's just, you know, I'm going to send this over to Jessica. I hit share. She's now going to get an email that will then take her to this dashboard, and then one click away from a dashboard. Now, if she wanted to see this dashboard and get it notified every time it was updated, she could actually subscribe. You can hit subscribe, and then anytime you get a refresh dashboard, it's going to send you a notification. You click on the button, and boom, there's your way for distributing dashboards and reports inside Power BI. So with that, we're going to open it up to some questions, and then we'll be closing out the webinar. So Jessica, how we're doing?
Got it. Thanks, Mike. That was great. So one of the questions we have here is Power BI available on premises?
Yes. So as of July 1st, there is now the capability to deploy Power BI Report Server, new product, to your on-premise. Now, it does require SQL Server, and you either have to go with the Power BI Premium subscription, or you have to have SQL Server Enterprise, and you have to have a software assurance contract with Microsoft. But absolutely, we can now deploy Power BI dashboards to our own report server. There's still a few limitations. If you want to know about details there, give us a call or an email, and we can cover those details with you.
Great, thank you. The next question is, what is the difference between the free and the pro version?
Okay, so the free version is really, you can think of it as a personal version. So it allows you to connect to data sources and build your dashboards, but that's really it. And you can publish it to your own workspace. But outside of that, if you want to share that with other people, that's the limit. That's really the defining limit of the free version. There's a couple others, like you can't do live query and a couple other advanced things, but by and large, Free is really a personal version for you to do either training or get up to speed. But to really use it in a company or organization, you have to go with the pro version or the premium version. But it's really so affordable. The pro version is $9.99 per month. So for $120 a year, you know, that's 2 Mocha Grande lattes, you know, per month, per individual, and everybody can have the pro version. And then higher seats, or if you've got an enterprise agreement, that'll be lower as well, of course.
Okay, and the last question is, what is needed to access on-premises data sources?
Okay. So that's usually where we see, we see a pretty good solid mix of on-premise data sources. So in your Power BI portal, you'll want to click on the little gear icon, and you'll see this Manage Gateways. And from here, you can actually, if you've set up your gateways is where you manage them, but to download it, you go to Data Gateway. And what that will do is that will download a little application that you install typically on a workstation that's going to be able to connect to your data sources, that doesn't get shut down periodically. And it will then allow you to set up a connection to your on-premise data source. And then it will allow you to connect to that to the PowerBI.com service. So it's a gateway literally from the service to your on-premise source. It's all secure, highly compressed, and highly secured through SSL and all that fun stuff, so that you don't have to worry about it just having open data there. But that's the way that you do that, is connect through the data gateway. We generally recommend the enterprise gateway versus the personal, but when you download that, you get the option, and it's real simple to set up, and we can help walk you through that if you want to do that.
Thanks, Mike. So that seems to be all the questions for today. If you have any additional questions, please send them to either myself or to Mike. In the next couple of days, you'll receive a copy of the presentation and a copy of a link to the recording of the webcast. Thank you, everyone, for your participation. Have a great day.
Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.